This is stream 3. Yay. Best stream. My section. Crazy. Clever. Cool. 3C. Welcome to your first LLN lecture with me. You know, my name is up there, but I have a nickname. You know my nickname? Magic Mike. And you're going to see why in just a few seconds. But I just want to say one thing. I gave this lecture last week to Stream 4, and 3 times during my lecture, I had to stop and go and wake up people that put their heads down on the desk. I don't think my lecture was boring. I thought it was pretty interesting, but they were very impolite and just put their heads down and went to sleep. So if you're going to sleep, please sit up straight and draw some eyes on your eyelids so you can just sleep, but it looks like you're looking at it. Okay. So, introduction to critical thinking. You close that door and the vacuum cleaner is bothering me. But you've already started. This is week 3. So you already know everything. I don't need to give you this lecture. Don't you? Not yet? Okay. Well, I'm going to introduce the liberal arts, the idea of liberal arts, and also I'm going to talk about Malin. Have you finished reading Malin? Did you finish? No? Did you start? My section knows it perfectly well. If you have any questions about Malin, please talk to 3C. But before that, I want to demonstrate some critical thinking. I want to demonstrate critical thinking for you. And what's your name? Hayato. Yeah. You are my student, so I have to ask. You're not my Sakura. Sir, what's your name?
Hiroki.
Hiroki?
Yeah.
Hiroki, that was my grandfather's name. And my grandfather, this actually is my grandfather's wedding ring. He was a big guy, really big guy, like you, big guy. Hiroki.
Yeah.
Okay, Grandpa Hiroki. My grandfather's wedding ring, and my grandmother's wedding ring. Her name was Yuki. Hiroki, are these together?
Yeah.
Together. There's one there and one down there. Okay. So these are together. Okay. All right. I'll do that again. Like a little bell. Yuki, are these together? Okay, good. There's one, and here's my other grandmother's wedding ring. Her name was Maho. And that ring is also on there. 1, 2. Now, this one is dangerous. Maho's ring was dangerous because it comes off just like that. And this one goes on just like that. And now people are usually clapping. Okay. Yuki, are these together?
Yes.
Okay, good. There's one, and there's the other one here. And it goes right through. Then I have Mickey Mouse. And my grandfather would take Hiroki would take Mickey's ear, one ear like that, and reach in and take off the other ear. And then, if I just rub this on the top, it becomes warm. And it just goes right through. There's 1, there's 2, up. Let's try that one more time. There's 2. Okay. Now, this is really difficult because there's 2 of them on there, but one comes off like that and falls on the floor. Solid ring. And this one comes off too, just like that. Thank you. Okay. Now, what has this got to do with critical thinking? You ask yourself. Well, I'm going to tell you the secret of this. My grandfather, Hiroki, worked for NASA, the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, and he worked in metals. Metal. He was a metal expert. And this metal he made for me, this is made of mercury. Mercury is the liquid metal that's inside the thermometers. And this is a special kind of mercury that usually is solid, but if I rub my finger on it, like this, it becomes soft. This is still hard, but that right there was soft because of my finger, the warmth of the human body. Hey. You believe me? I know. Okay. And then it comes off just like that. How many people believe me? You're supposed to believe what your teacher said. Isn't that what Malin says? If you don't believe me, it's because you're doing some critical thinking. You're able to tell the difference between sense and nonsense. And that's the definition. That's the first definition up here on your handout, that critical thinking is the ability to distinguish between sense and nonsense in all areas, even if you're not an expert in those areas. So you're not an expert of metal, but what you know that, yes, mercury is a liquid, but it doesn't become soft like butter. That's nonsense. That's critical thinking. But let me tell you a true thing now. This is true. Maybe. What is this? Chalk. Okay, chalk is made of what? Calcium. Calcium. Calcium, it goes into milk and to make strong bones. It's healthy for your bones. And this chalk dust, I've been teaching at ICU for 28 years. Every day, using chalk, the calcium has gone into my left hand. And it's made the bones of my left hand so strong, I could punch a hole right in this desk if I wanted to. Because I'm like Iron Man in this fist. Because of calcium dust. You don't believe this? Okay, you're doing critical thinking again. All right. Again, you know, yes, calcium makes bones strong, but it doesn't go through your skin. That's nonsense. So you do critical thinking every day by understanding the difference between sense and nonsense. But sometimes it's not so easy. So this definition by Aristotle, the Greek philosopher, is more than 2,000 years old on the definition of critical thinking. But still, it's still good today, I think. And all of you have chosen, maybe you chose a liberal arts university, maybe you were forced. How many of you chose ICU as number one choice? Yay, thank you. How many of you were forced to come here? Whoa, one person was forced. Sorry. We'll try to make it nice for you. Liberal arts. What's the purpose of a liberal arts university? What's the meaning of liberal? What does liberal mean? Or what's the root word of liberal? Why don't you talk with your neighbor for a minute? What's the verb of liberal? Talk with your neighbor for a second. Okay, what's the verb? What's the verb of liberal? Anybody? Somebody? Yes, sir.
Freedom.
The verb of liberal is free. Freedom's not a verb.
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 Oh, verb.
Verb.
Sorry. Sorry.
Sorry's not a verb either. Yeah. But what's the verb? What's the verb of liberal? Liberate. Thank you. Your name? Kosuke. That was my grandfather's name. My other grandfather. Yuki's husband. Or Kamaho's husband. Liberate. Liberate. And liberate means to set free. To make free. What does a liberal arts university make free? You're free from your parents? No. Free from society in the isolated, crazy utopia, ivory tower of ICU? No. What does liberal arts liberate? Yes, sir. Stereotypes. Okay, but yeah. But what does a liberal arts university make free? Does it make your hands free? Does it make your legs free? Yes? You had your hand up? Yeah. What does your thinking for you? What organ?
Maybe free from being compelled to say what you don't want to.
Okay, but what do we think with? Our brain. Liberal arts should make your mind free. Your mind free from prejudice, from other ideas. Your mind should be set free from ignorance. Ignorance means not knowing something. When you don't know something, you are controlled by the people who know, by other people's information, other people's opinions, other people's way of thinking, other people's prejudice. If you don't think for yourself, if you can't tell the difference between sense and nonsense, your mind is wrapped up in like chains. You're a prisoner. But liberal arts breaks those chains. And you're a liberal arts person. There's a big L. Not loser, but liberal. Liberal arts person. It sets your mind free. And in all areas, a university, what's the root word of university? Universe. And what does this word mean? Uni. One. Yeah, one whole thing. And the liberal arts gives you, originally liberal arts universities had seven different areas. Like there was mathematics, music, history, art, etc. All these different areas. And liberal arts universities have a similar wide range of areas to study. And all of them together makes the whole knowledge, the universe of knowledge. And hopefully you learn to think for yourself, even when you're not an expert in those areas. So you can tell the difference between sense and nonsense. But my grandfather really did work for NASA, maybe. Okay, so thank you for choosing liberal arts, and hopefully you will actually become critical thinkers at the end of the ELA or at the end of your 4 or 5 or 6 years here at ICU, at graduate school, etc. All right, so but what is critical thinking then, part 2? A very, very simple definition is just thinking for yourself, as I mentioned earlier. You think for yourself. But how do you do that? One of the steps is hunting for assumptions. Hunting for assumptions. Here's an exercise here. An assumption is an unspoken belief about the world. Maybe some kind of value or some kind of idea about the world. And an assumption is always part of an argument. Here we have a claim. Don't buy the bag. That's an opinion. That's a claim. Everyone has their opinion. Buy the bag, don't buy the bag, that's a good bag, that's a bad bag. Those are opinions. But when you add evidence to an opinion, it becomes an argument. And inside an argument, there's always an assumption that connects this evidence with this claim. There's a belief that connects these two together. Can you talk with your neighbor a little bit and try to figure out what is the assumption that connects this evidence to this claim? Talk to your neighbor for a minute. What is the assumption that connects these two together?
What should we do now?
What is it called? Professor? I said you're supposed to find the assumption that links those two together. There's an assumption that connects them. Okay, anyone find the assumption that connects these two together? Yes.
My name?
Your name's expensive? How much is it? No, the assumption that connects. An assumption is a belief, a value, often a value or a value statement, a belief about the world. Expensive? What's the assumption? Not people's feelings. Okay, let me give you a hint. If the same person says, don't buy those shoes, they're expensive. Don't buy that car, it's expensive.
You should not buy something expensive.
Yes, don't buy expensive things. You shouldn't buy expensive things. This person believes that. That's an assumption that connects this evidence to this claim. It's not spoken, it's not said out loud, but the person believes it. And critical thinkers, you're able to hunt to find those assumptions. Okay, so here's another one. Don't listen to Mike. He has no hair. What's the assumption that connects these two together? Talk to your neighbor. Okay, what's the assumption? Yes, sir. Yes. Don't listen to men who have no hair. So, don't listen to Dan. No hair. Okay. So, this is the assumption. This is the linking assumption that connects this evidence to this claim. This person believes this. This is only an opinion, just an opinion, it's not a fact. But the person who's making this argument, if he says, don't listen to Mike, he has no hair, don't listen to Dan, he has no hair, don't listen to Paul Wadden, he has no hair, etc., that person believes, don't listen to men with no hair. That's an assumption. And critical thinkers can find those assumptions. But it's difficult to find, especially your own assumptions, because we usually don't think about them. All right, here's an example. This is the example that's, look at this example on your handout. The government should stop the manufacture and sale of cigarettes. More and more evidence has shown that smoking has harmful effects on the health of both the smoker and those exposed to smoking. Okay, so we have an evidence and claim. Now talk to your neighbors again and find the linking assumption that connects those two together. Talk with your neighbor. Okay, anyone have an idea what the linking assumption is? Yes, sir. Yes, there you go. You shouldn't do things harmful? Okay, that's an assumption, but it doesn't link. It doesn't connect. The assumption has to touch both. It has to connect. If you only have an assumption about the evidence or only an assumption about the claim, it doesn't link. So it has to link them together. Yes, sir.
The government should stop the manufacture and sale of things which have harmful effect on our health.
Okay, why?
harm.
Okay, you're getting closer. That's closer. The government should stop things that are bad for our health. Why? Other ideas? Yes?
Don't stop cigarette. Don't smoke.
Don't smoke cigarettes?
Yeah.
Okay, but that doesn't mention the government. The government is not in that. The assumption has to talk about government. Yes?
It's better to sell that things that bad for health, and it encourages people to die.
Okay, those are assumptions also, but it doesn't link. It doesn't mention government. Yes?
It is clear that smoking has bad effects on people, and so the government shouldn't encourage people to do so because they have to guarantee their nation's life or
Who's they? They have to guarantee, who's they?
the government
The government has to what?
has to guarantee donations and life or
Donations?
that the nation.
The nations? That's very close, very close. The government has to guarantee the nation's life. It has to be more specific to this evidence. Yes?
That's because if government should stop manufacture, more people will get cigarettes.
Okay. Let me give you a hint. Why the government? Why should the government stop this? Yes, sir.
Governments are afraid that people are dying. They'll be dying because of unhealth.
Okay, but why should the government stop it? Yes.
Cigarette manufacturer makes a lot of money for the company, so the companies that don't stop manufacturing, that government has to restrict them and stop them. Or many people die with smoking.
Yes, that's an assumption also, but it's not the simple linking assumption that connects this specific evidence with this specific claim. Yes?
Even though the government, even if the smoking has harmful effects on people, people don't stop until the government stops the manufacturing.
But why should the government do it? Yeah. Just speak out. There's too many hands.
Government is responsible for people.
For the people's what? The government is responsible. The government should protect the public's health. That's very close to what you were saying. This person absolutely believes it's the government's responsibility to protect the public's health. Otherwise, this person would not say the government has to do this. Why the government? Because, where's my paper? Magic. Everything was so nicely organized. And okay. It's the government's responsibility to protect our health. Where is that handout? Huh? Where's my hair? I lost that too. Okay. The government should protect the public's health. That's the assumption. Because the government should stop. And the people, it's dangerous for the public. So this person absolutely believes that. But that's only a belief. In America, right now, or over the past couple of years, Barack Obama has made public health care. And there were people, politicians fighting against this because they said, no, it's the private person's responsibility to get health, not the government. The government shouldn't provide you with health care. It's your individual responsibility. It's the opposite assumption. The individual is responsible for their health. And so if you believe that, then, and you're a smoker, you say, yeah, I know cigarettes are bad for my health, but I don't care, I want to smoke, and the government should stay out of my life, leave me alone. It's not your responsibility, it's my responsibility. Those are different assumptions. And if you have a different assumption, you do not accept this evidence and this argument. You say, I don't care, it's not the government's responsibility. But the other side says, yes it is, the government should stop it. And those people might argue, and they can't come to an agreement because they don't understand each other's assumptions. So critical thinkers, when you read this, you can find the assumption and you say, oh, so you think it's the government's job to protect people's health? You're able to spot that assumption. It takes practice, but that's one of the important elements of critical thinking, is hunting and finding these assumptions. Okay. So, and you're going to have a lot more of this in the next section on argumentation, the next topic after Malin. But then after you find these assumptions, the third step is looking at your ideas and decisions from different points of view. So, for example, with this government case, you look at the other side. So is it really the government's job or not? Is it my responsibility for my health? You look at from different points of view, several points of view, and then finally you take some informed action. You are informed. You know you're thinking. You've looked at evidence. You've looked at reasons, and you can make a good decision. So these are the four. One way of looking at critical thinking. These four steps. And then how do you start these four steps? How do you start thinking for yourself? I think it's pretty simple. You just always ask why. Start by asking why. And especially in your texts, I'm sure that your instructors are asking you to engage in a conversation with the text. Mr. Mayland is dead. He died a few years ago. And I've been working at ICU I told you, for 28 years. That's why bones in my hand are like iron. And a long time ago, I was in Kinokuniya bookstore in Shinjuku, looking at books on teaching writing. And I was looking at here's the original College Thinking book. And I looked at it and said, College Thinking. Oh, I teach in a college, so I took this out. And I opened it, and I flipped to the beginning, and it said, do not accept anything in this book unless you have thought it through for yourself, unless you understand the reasons why I say what I say, and unless they seem to you to be good reasons. And my mind just exploded. What? What? Don't believe this book? I just pick it off the shelf and don't believe this book? What a great book, I thought. This is perfect for the ELA. So I bought it, and we've been using chapters of this book. And Mr. Mayland wrote this book for American college first-year students. And when you read this, when I read this, I read it many, many times, I was asking, Mr. Mayland was not in front of me, but I was asking questions to him like, oh really? Or why? And so hopefully your teachers are really stressing that you engage in a conversation, that you annotate your text. Annotate means writing in the margins. And Have you ever wondered, why is this ELA reader so big? Before it was B5 size. But Miguel Sosa, my good friend, said the students need more space to write. So he suggested we make these margins wide so you have space to write, to annotate. And this, asking the text a question, like why, or marking this, that's the first step of critical reading. You're not a passive reader. You're being an active reader. So hopefully you're doing this in your text. Okay. So I finished part 2, and we're moving on to part 3. And you've already read most of Malin, or parts of Malin, but I just want to point out a few things that I think are important. And the first, I've already read this quote that you don't accept anything in this text, in this book, unless you've thought it through for yourself, etc., etc. Because Malin says this, that's his basic beginning point. Don't believe anything in this book. Mr. Malin has a very difficult job to convince you, to persuade you that critical thinking is important in college. He doesn't say, just, I'm a teacher, just believe me, just trust me, just memorize this, be a critical thinker, it's important. Yes, okay, memorized. No, he says, don't believe anything I say. So he has to persuade you with good reasons to become critical thinkers and to believe what he says in this text. Because he passionately believes in heaven, critical thinking heaven, that being a critical thinker is important for your life, for school, and beyond. So, that's why he writes the way he writes. He gives you many examples, but he never says you must believe this or you must do that. He's trying to convince you with good reasons. And it's up to you to accept or not accept his points. One of the big distinctions that he makes is between normative statements and descriptive statements. You know the difference between these two? What's a normative statement? Somebody? 3C. Anybody remember? You're supposed to memorize these things. Yes, sir.
Ideal statement.
Ideal statement. Okay, the way things. You see the word norm, like normal. Norm means the way things should be. Yeah, an ideal. So if I say, well, a normative statement is the way that things should be. And a descriptive statement is what? What's a descriptive statement? How things really are, exactly. So if I say stream 3 is the most intelligent stream in the ELA, is that a descriptive statement or a normative statement? Normative? Huh? It's not true? It's not descriptive, the way things really are? No? Okay. All right. How about we, in the ELA, we teach critical thinking. Is that normative or descriptive? Really? Every class in the ELA teaches critical thinking? Every time? Maybe no. And there's pronunciation classes, for example, and other kinds of classes that don't really deal with critical thinking. Or you have lessons sometimes that are not connected with critical thinking. But it's the way things should be. So I think that would be a normative statement. So this is not, this kind of distinction, this kind of difference is important, I think, for you to understand not only in Malin, but in your own writing, in your essays, when you make statements, when you're writing, you're making claims. Are they descriptive or are they normative? And when you read anything in the ELA Reader or any text, you should ask yourself, is this really telling the way things are, the way things should be? So other readings later in the winter term or the fall, the winter term, these two words come up again, normative and descriptive, in a different, completely different reading. So it's a distinction, it's a difference that you'll find again and again in college that you should remember. Or if you choose to, you should remember. Don't believe anything I say. I have no hair. Okay, so that's an important distinction. And then, in basis of belief, you've read this already, I'm sure. The dream of the woman's husband was kidnapped, and she had a dream that he was in a warehouse, remember? And the police followed clues and found that the dream was actually true. But, and the purpose of this is to show that, well, dreaming is not the way to make good reasons. And if you use dreams as a basis of belief, you can easily lose your belief because your dreams don't come true. College as a subversive institution is a really interesting section, I think. Have you read this already, everyone? What does subversive mean? Destroy? Maybe not destroy, but what does sub mean? Under. And vers means version, like change. You change from underneath. Maybe you don't destroy it, but maybe secretly you change from below, underneath. And Malin gave you many examples of university students in protests, etc. And you know that ICU was taken over in the 1970s. HomeCon and ACON were taken over by students. There was no teaching. And some of those radical subversive students now are professors here at ICU. One of the important distinctions here is suspending your judgment and suspending your judgment and doubting. Do you remember what Malin said about suspend and doubt? What's the difference? And doubt? Subjective? Okay. Yeah, that's pretty close. Doubt means you think it's false. You believe it's false. Suspend means you don't think it's true or false. You hit the pause button. You're not sure. And you wait to make a judgment. And you should question obvious things. I have a personal experience with this questioning obvious things that was very important for my life. And I think I told this story to 3C already, but I grew up in a Catholic school. Went to Catholic elementary school and junior high school. My teachers were sisters, nuns, like penguins, black and white. And my school was above the Catholic Church. I had to go to Sunday school and went to church all the time, every Sunday, and there were many things. And my friends would be out playing, sports or tennis or going somewhere, and I had to go to church. So when I was maybe in the beginning of high school, I asked my father, why do I have to go to church? And what was his answer? We're Catholics. We go to church. It's obvious. We're Catholics. You go to church on Sunday. That's what Catholics do. It's obvious. But that did not satisfy me. So I said to my father, okay, Dad, how about you and Mom and Brad and Bill, my brothers, you go to church, and why do I have to go to church? What was his answer this time? If you live in my house and you eat my food and wear the clothes that I buy for you, you're going to go to church on Sunday. Whoa. So he got angry because I was questioning his obvious belief. And Malin says, when you question obvious things, it seems that you're attacking them. My father thought I was attacking his belief system. I wasn't. I just wanted to know why do I have to go to church? Because at that time I was already studying magic as a hobby for several years. And there were many I had a big catalog of magic tricks. And one of the magic tricks was a pitcher, like a big mug of water, and you pour this into clear cups. And when you pour the water into the first cup, it becomes wine. The second one is beer. The third one is milk. The next one is coffee. And it's a magic trick that you can buy because there's some little powdered chemicals in the glass. And I'm thinking, what? Water into wine? Change water into wine? Jesus did that. Was he a magician? I started to question my own beliefs, and I was wondering, should I go to church? So eventually I stopped going to church and I started searching for Buddhism. And because of that, I came to Japan, and here I am teaching you. Because that question of obvious thing led me on a very interesting road. But it was dangerous at first, difficult. So it's the duty of people to question, of students to question. Have any of you questioned any obvious thing of your parents and you got in trouble? They got angry at you? Anyone? Don't be shy. Yes. What can you talk about it? A little?
From my experience, it's just like as you, because my mother is also Catholic and I'm also Catholic, but in the church you have to say I believe in Imperial Church or something like that, and I studied in world history at high school, and the old churches were super dirty, they did bad things. And
many wars, yes.
Many wars,
Yeah.
and I was like, oh my god, I can't say such things. And
Yeah.
I also got really angry.
Your mother got parents? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well, it's a part of your mind growing. And usually this happens in colleges. It doesn't happen in high school so much because, as Malin says, high school is memorizing. You don't question it. You don't question the text. You don't question the teachers. You just memorize and spit it out again in an exam. But in college, you're encouraged to question and to think for yourself. So that's a very interesting. So please remember these 2 points and try to do those at ICU. The why reasons matter. This section, this is where Malin tries to solve the problem. He said in here, don't accept anything I believe, or anything that I say, unless you believe it for yourself. But in this section, why reasons matter, he really tries to give you reasons for reasons. Why should you have good reasons? Don't just believe you should have good reasons because he's a teacher, because it's in a book. So he gives you 5 reasons, but he calls them justifications. Because if you use the word reason, the first reason for having good reasons is blah, blah, blah. The second reason for having good reasons for reason is too confusing. So he calls them justifications. And he gives you 5 justifications and tries to make you see that, yes, having good reasons is good for you. Okay, so I won't go into that section because I'm sure you've read it already, or you will read it and discuss it. Chapter 6, Reading with Understanding. I don't know if your sections are going to read this. It's a long section. It has to do with argumentation and assumptions and etc. So I'm not going to talk about that. But if your teacher doesn't assign this chapter 6, I recommend that you read it anyway, because Malin makes a very important another distinction in this chapter. It's a long and it's a little bit difficult, but it's worth reading because he talks about how to read and get a critical opinion. Because many students think, well, any opinion is okay. My opinion is as good as any other opinion. But Malin in this section says that there are informed opinions that are better than just uninformed opinions. Opinions based on good reasons when you read. And there's examples in chapter 6. F is chapter 7. What is a good student? How to get the best out of your teachers. Have you read that chapter yet? No? Okay. It talks about what good students do. For example, good students challenge their instructors. Make them explain assignments. When your professors or when your instructors give you a writing assignment, do you say, excuse me, why do we need to do this? Or do you just do it without question? You should challenge the instructor to give good reasons for your homework or your professors. But Malin says students are a little bit shy to do that because they think the teachers are very, elite or famous teachers, and you don't want to question them. But university are paid. My salary is paid by your parents. We are your servants. So you should use office hours. You should come and talk to people. After class, talk to your instructors. Go to their office and talk to them. Malin gives you lots of advice that maybe you don't know in this section. Okay, let me show you another thing here about. This is a comic called Doonesbury, and we read it this way. So I'll read this together with you. So we have a classroom here, and the professor says, for tomorrow, I want you to write an essay on the topic of independent thought, independent thinking. Thinking for yourself is the essay topic. The students have to write an essay. And they scribble, 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 scribble. What does that mean, scribble, scribble? It's the sound of pen or paper, pencil on paper, right? And the professor says, everyone got that? Everyone understand? BAA, 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 sir. What is BAA? Bah! Bah! What's that? The sound of what animal? Horse? No. Sheep. In English, sheep goes bah. And what do sheep do? Sheep follow. Follow the leader. They go wherever they're told to go. They just follow in a great big herd of sheep. So the students, independent thinking, You're going to write an essay on independent thinking? Bah, Mike. Okay. So the professor then adds his opinion. He says, in my view, Jefferson's defense of these basic rights lacked conviction. So Thomas Jefferson, who helped to write the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, that all men are created equal, and etc., he says Jefferson's defense, what he was defending these, was not sincere, he says. Any question, any discussion? Scribble, scribble, scribble. Scene, quiet. And he thinks to himself, of course not, there's no questions. You're too busy writing it all down. So the professor gets a little bit angry. And he challenges the students and he says, okay, let me just add that personally, I believe the Bill of Rights to be a silly, inconsequential, meaningless recapitulation, means repetition of the truths that are already found in the Constitution. So the Bill of Rights, which lists out basic human rights, he says this was just silly, useless repeating of the Constitution. Any questions? Scribble, scribble, scribble. So he gets more angry. No, scratch that, never mind. The Constitution should not have been ratified, not approved. It's dangerous. All the power should rest with the executive, with the president. The president should have all the power. What do you think about that? Scratch, scratch, they scratch it out and write it down. No, Jefferson was the Antichrist. Democracy is fascism. Black is white. Night is day. Scribble, scribble, scribble. Teaching is dead. And then the student says, "What, boy, wow, this course is really interesting. I didn't know half of this stuff. I didn't know that black was white, night was day, democracy was fascism." Why did I show you this cartoon here? What's the purpose? Who's not thinking critically? Not just these students. Don't be sheep. Don't be sheep. Yes, Mike. Be independent thinkers. Challenge. Malin in this chapter 7 says that teaching must be a two-way street. The students have responsibilities and duties to ask questions and challenge their instructors. Otherwise, teaching is dead. And last year, a few years ago, I kept telling my section, don't be sheep, don't be sheep. And finally, at the end of the year, they gave me a helmet with horns on it. I was the leader of the sheep. I forgot to bring it. I was going to bring it today and show you. But think for yourself. And when you're on this journey through ICU, you have to ask yourself, you've chosen a liberal arts university, thinking for yourself, I'm assuming, my assumption is, you believe thinking for yourself is important. So, please do your best. Please challenge your instructors. Don't be sheep.